Hey, tired. What's up? It's a culture detective here investigating your favorite albums, and today I'm going to be doing an album review on the new Backwash album Only Dust Remains. So Backwash is a singer, songwriter, producer, and she's back with a new album. Previously, in the last few years of this YouTube channel, I have covered some of her music, including her sophomore album, God Has Nothing to Do with This, Leave Him Out of It, as well as her next album, I Lie Here Buried with My Rings and Dresses. Both of these albums showcase a lot of anger and rage and frustration, and it always comes from a socio-politically charged anger about the black and the trans identity, as well as faith, spirituality, and depression. So obviously Backxwash has been making music that's quite similar, but recently there has been some interesting changes. For instance, we have Backxwash's latest album, which sees her making music that is bleak, but at the very end, there is a happy twist to it, which is what essentially Backxwash continues to go for on this album. So this is Backxwash's newest album, Only Dust Remains, and I'm gonna be honest here, this is easily her best album to date. Instrumentally very ambitious, very lush, very layered, but also at the same time there is this balance between the bleak and the dark and the noisy to something that is genuinely beautiful and moving and heartfelt, and this kind of balance is achieved perfectly where no either side feels like it's doing too much or too little. Starting off, we have Black Lazarus, which has chants, tablas. I really love tablas. Every time I listen to music and I hear these Indian or not not primarily Indian, primarily Hindustani, that region in general, South Asian drums, tablas, they're always candy to my ears. Then we have dissonant strings, background vocals, very angry lyrics about a corrupt, broken world, and of course the ongoing genocides. And then following that, we have Wake Up, which is a 7-minute monster with dramatic pianos and horns. Lyrically, she talks about depression, self-hatred, but also finding happiness, with the last 2 minutes or so of that track being this beautiful piano soul ending, which is you would usually hear this kind of thing in hip hop, but when it is done in a more noisy industrial sort of place, it just sounds so fascinating. Undesirable has this weird ambient backdrop and these cutesy vocal arpeggios, bum 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 bum, but at the same time it's also really dusty and sad and broken. And then we have the tabla sort of coming back and lyrics about self-reflection and growing up and being more mature. It's very interesting. We have an interlude called Ninth Gate that leads to Ninth Heaven, which is this really beautiful and lush track with distant soul slash R&B vocals, creating an airy and almost dreamy vibe to the track. Never will I ever expect a Backxwash track to sound as airy and as dreamy and as spacey as on this track and a couple other tracks for the rest of this album. Then we have the buzzy bass, then the last act of this track introduced some break beats that sort of came out of nowhere, but it kind of just works perfectly onto the track. Following that, we have Dissociation, which is surprisingly shoegazy and soft. We have airy drums and auto-tune vocals in the middle for extra flavor. History of Violence is a track that comments on the absolutely fucked up state of the world, fascism, but then we are also hit with the biblical references. The strings and the pianos on this track are moving, they're blossoming. Think of Radiohead's Identikit and the ending of that track, but then just extend it. Then you have the instrumentals of this track, which is, again, it's so crazy that lyrically it's dealing with something so dark, and then musically it's dealing with something so bright. Stairway to Heaven is like this psych prog rock-ish track with guitar solo. And lyrically, it deals with mortality, but unfortunately, I would have to admit that instrumentally, this track is a little bit forgettable. And finally, the album ends off with the title track, which is just a beautifully heavenly ending to the album. It's about growing, it's about finding hope, and again, the whole album is just a strange yet perfectly calculated balance between dark, bleak, noisy anger to sort of this beautiful heavenly thing. And there isn't a single moment where I feel like these genres or sounds clash. In fact, whenever we switch from something dark to something blissful, there's always a logical push, whether it is a self-discovery, embracing yourself, loving yourself, learning, but also maybe it's something more external, finding hope in the world, finding some kind of resolution in the midst of all this cloudiness. It's always such an interesting process jumping between these two styles and sounds. Either way, this is instrumentally one of the most interesting and also ambitious albums coming from Backxwash. Legitimately impressed with the album. Probably my favorite album of the year to date. I'm giving the new Backxwash album Only Dust Remains a light 9 out of 10. So have you listened to the new Backxwash album? Comments below, let me know, subscribe if you want more, and thanks for watching. I'm so tired.